Welcome to the 2 Feet First Entrepreneur Podcast. I am so excited that you're here today. I'm planning on this being a short episode just because there's something that's been going on in my own business that I wanted to discuss with you. And that thing that I want to talk about today is discussing learning to take action. So we all know that taking action is essential for success, but it's sometimes really hard to do, okay? Taking the action is really hard to do. You can get paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision or something not being perfect before you put it out into the world, because we're content creators and we share lots of stuff, but sometimes we're afraid of what people might think. But let's face it, we overthink this a lot of the time, and it doesn't have to be that way. And that's what I really want to discuss today is getting over that fear, getting over that overwhelm, getting over feeling like you need to be perfect, and just get your content out there. So you're probably wondering, you have a bunch of questions going through your mind. And one of the first ones that I normally think of is, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I do this one thing and I put it out there, but I could have done something else instead, and that one thing was the wrong thing, okay? This one's a big one, okay? This is one that we all fear. This is one that we're all worried about, okay? It's a valid concern. But the main thing that you have to remember when you ask this question, the wrong decision doesn't mean that it was wrong for you in that moment. What you needed in that moment was to make a decision, to test it out, and discover that it was not the right decision. But that doesn't even mean that it's not going to happen. Something great could come from something that didn't happen the way you wanted it to. And that's something else that we have to remember. Sometimes what we want isn't necessarily what we really need. I know we all believe in different things, but I believe that there is a God and that there's some higher power than us that is helping us turn us into these beings that will be amazing. It'll help us reach our dreams. And sometimes those dreams are not even that we realize yet. We have a kind of an idea of what we want, but as you kind of evolve, as you go along, things change and you realize that certain things that you wished way back when are not going to benefit you anymore. They wouldn't be the right thing. So I want you to remember that is that if you're worried about making the wrong decision, it might not be the wrong decision for you. It might be the decision you needed to get you to somewhere else. So don't ever be afraid about making the wrong decision, because the right thing is that you made a decision and you went for it. So even if it turns out really, really bad, and honestly, what's the worst that could happen? No one views it. Nobody likes your post. Nobody clicks through something. Well, what can you learn from that? Why didn't they click through? Was it your hook? Was it the content itself? Was it that you didn't present it in a way that actually made your audience want the content? What can you learn from it? Anything that you put out there is something that you can learn from. And that is something so spectacular about being an entrepreneur, is that you get to learn every day. And that actually is what makes you a successful entrepreneur, is not being afraid to get messy, not being afraid to test things out, not being afraid to fail. I can't even remember what the actual number is, but it's really, really high that a lot of the times successful entrepreneurs that we see had like 5 failed attempts of something before their success. So remember that. We always see the success in people and not the failures. I think that's something that we need to share more, is the not pretty, the not perfect things, the things that didn't work, because that's what helps other people progress and what helps us progress into being what we truly need to be and should be, and ultimately what we want to be, even though we might not see it today. So I hope that you see that you should not have the fear of making the wrong decision, because the whole thing is making the decision to propel you to where you need to be. So that brings us to the next question that you're probably thinking is, okay, well, I made the decision to post it, but it's not perfect. Or we get stuck in the mindset that I can't post this until it's perfect. And it's a big one. It's one that I struggle with. It's one that we all probably struggle with. And the thing that I heard recently that I love, I guess it wasn't recently, it was a couple years ago, is it's not about being perfect, but it's about making progress. So it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. And whatever progress looks to you, progress could be that, oh, I posted this week, or I posted this month, or I shared something that was really hard for me to share with my audience. It's the progress of doing something. So don't get stuck that it has to be perfect. Think of instead that I'm progressing, that I'm evolving. This actually happened to me this week with my accountability partner. I am in the process of just trying to be consistent on social media. And so I just hurry and wrote up a caption and sent it out there into the world and didn't really take the time to look through it, didn't do anything like that. And she got on with this call with me and she's like, you know what? I love seeing that you're actually posting, but I want to hurry and give you a couple feedback tips on this one post that I noticed. And she pulled it up and we were looking through it. And as I'm reading through it, or, she's reading it to me out loud, I guess that's what I should say. She's reading it to me out loud. And I'm sitting there in my mind adjusting things and what I would do differently. And it's actually, those are the tips that she made. But I wouldn't have known that unless I would have just put it out. If I didn't put it out there, if I held on to it until I made it perfect, I wouldn't see, I wouldn't know, I wouldn't have these shared things with other people. And also, maybe the messy is sometimes what people really want. I know that I'm from the DIY space, but Pinterest is a really big traffic for me. I get lots of traffic from Pinterest. And so something that I heard a long time ago is, we're always worried about taking the perfect photo, taking the perfect picture of this item. And this in particular goes with recipes and food. And they were talking about how, I got my lighting just perfect. I got my food there and made it look so pretty and put all the other little details in there. And I took the picture and it bombed because they were reposting an old post. So their original photo of this was not that great, right? They're like, it was kind of sad. It was kind of embarrassing looking at compared to where they are now. But this new image didn't do as well as the old image. And the old image still to this day, that's the amazing thing with Pinterest is it lives on there forever. And so this image was doing way better than the new one. And, she said that she got feedback from her audience that they actually liked the messy. They liked looking at this photo that looked like, oh, I took this in my own home. My lighting's not fantastic. It looks like something that I would serve to my family because it looks like it actually would be the item that I'm serving rather than looking a little too colored in certain aspects, right? So it's not about being perfect. And I really love that idea too. Another side note on that is something else that I've heard on social media is they have all these filters and there's nothing wrong with filters, but I want to try to encourage you not to use them in the way that they distort the way you actually look or how items actually look. Make it be real life. Make it be what everybody is going to, like if they came to your house and they saw you, you would look like that person rather than this person that looks like they have a little bit bigger lips or more blush on or tan or something like that. So I encourage you to try to make it not be perfect, not look perfect, even like the perfect picture, right? But look like you and show the messy. The messy is what people want to see. I mean, let's talk about that in itself. What are those TV shows? What do they encourage? What's always the drama behind it? The messy, right? So what's the drama in your shoot? What's the drama in your content? Show people that messy. Show people that you're a work in progress. You're still working on it. Make them see you as a person. Make them be your friend. Make them be a part of your life and be in it with you. So that whole shebang, that whole story, the main thing is I want you to just remember that it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. And progress would be just sharing. Okay, just taking the action to do something, taking the action to finally hire someone to help you with something because you are just going to let go, right? We all know that one too. It's kind of hard to let go of your baby, right? You've grown this business, you've worked so hard for it, but it's okay to let go of some little thing. So don't be afraid to just make progress. Another question that is probably popped into your mind when we talked about this was, if you're going to just be wasting your time if you don't plan things out properly. And that's a valid concern. I'm going to say that. It's something that I struggle with. I want things to have a process. I want things to have a plan. But something that I have learned is that we all have to start somewhere. It's our journey. Everyone's looks different. And you don't want to look at someone's middle and expect your beginning to look like theirs, okay? Let me say that again. You don't want to look at someone's middle, and that's normally what we're doing, comparing. You don't want to compare someone's middle to your beginning, okay? So, for example, next week I'm going to talk about product management tools and why you need them, but I started using them. And when I've talked to some of my students that I have in my course, the automated assistant, and she felt like this one in particular felt like everything had to be perfect before she could start using it. She needed to have all of the different folders, all the different steps, all the different everything. But here's the thing, you need to actually do the process to start seeing where you're missing things. So if you're worried about it not being planned out, it's going to waste your time down the road. Guess what? You're creating the plan as you go. And that is actually better than trying to make a plan ahead of time and not knowing if it's truly going to work. It could flop horribly, even with a plan. Okay. But it's making the progress of getting there, taking the action. Okay. Another way that you can look at this is you have to start at the beginning of a trail, okay? I live in Utah where there's mountains everywhere, and well, at least where I live, we also have desert. But if you start on a trail, even in the desert, you have to start at the beginning of the trail. You can't start smack dab in the middle unless you have a helicopter dropping you off there. But how likely is that going to happen? So you have to start at the beginning of the trail. And you could take courses or have mentors that show you some shortcuts along the road. So think of this as your compass, right? Like, or your map. Let's say your phone's out. It's your Google Maps when you're doing a direction, right? It tells you all the different routes you can go. But that course and that mentor could show you that tiny little shortcut that you can bypass that struggle or the trying to figure something out. And that's why I encourage you to take the time to learn from other people. And when I say learn from other people, you are learning from their mistakes. You're learning from what worked for them. And that is helping you get to that middle spot by taking shortcuts. You're still starting from the beginning, but you're learning the shortcuts that'll help you jump a little bit faster, a little bit farther than you could have without those shortcuts, without those courses, without those mentors. And I hope you consider me as a mentor just by listening to this podcast, because there's things that I hope that I can share with you. Well, There's things that I really want to share with you that'll help you propel you, that will help you take that shortcut in your trail as an entrepreneur, because your trail is this business that you're starting, this content creating business. And you have a trail that you have mapped out in your own mind, which is your dreams. And you have this trail of getting there. But sometimes you have obstacles that come into view, or obstacles that block the path, and you have to figure out ways around them. And that is when you learn the most. Now, I'm going to say that again. When you hit obstacles, when you hit failures, when you hit roadblocks, when you hit this plan that you thought was going to be perfect and it didn't work as well as you thought it would be, that is when you learn the most. So don't be afraid to be able to learn, to be able to move yourself forward. It was a couple episodes ago where I talked about the book, Show Your Work. And in there, it talks about if you want to be successful, you have to make mistakes. That's actually one of the things that successful entrepreneurs are not afraid of, are not afraid of failing. They're not afraid because they know that that is where they make the most progress. That is where they make the most aha moments, the most areas that make their business move forward, that brings them to where they need to be. They're not afraid of them. And so we need to stop being afraid of them as well and start just doing it. Take action with our content. Now, this is why 2 feet first is actually a thing. I jumped into this because it's something that I just wanted to try. I took the action. I tried it, and guess what? It has paid off for me. Okay. There are points along that journey that I could have stopped. Actually, that most people probably would have stopped, but I decided it's what I wanted. It's something I wanted to do. And once I made that decision and I took action, things happened. And they happened faster than I thought they would have after all that lagging of not happening. So don't be afraid to jump in. Don't be afraid. So how do you take action? There's a few things that have helped me along the way. And these are probably things that you've heard from other people and you're like, yeah, that's great. But how is this any different? So I want to encourage you to just really think about these things and see the benefit of them. So the first one is setting a deadline for yourself and sticking to it. There is something about setting a deadline. It's the Parkinson law. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. Parkinson law is where it's like it's the demand of something expands to whatever your boundary is or your time. So let me share this with the deadline. So if you don't have a deadline, things are just going to keep going, right? You're just going to keep pushing it because there's no stopping point. There's no boundary. And so it's just going to keep expanding until you finally maybe one day realize that it's not what you want to do anymore, or, oh, it's so far out. There's so many more people doing that now. I don't think anybody would want to watch me. Like, so many things are going through your head, right? But if you set a deadline, it has a point where you just have to do it. Okay. And I was also talking to my accountability pod with this, and she is going to be releasing a course soon. And she's released it a few times now. And every time it's not what she wants it to be. This time she was hoping for it to be more of what she wanted it to be, which was like having all of her graphics ready, all of her workbooks looking super pretty rather than just typed out on a Google form or a Google Doc. And it's still not there. But she said, you know what? I've learned something, is that if I set a deadline and just do it, I see rewards from it. But she's done it previously, because she set a deadline this last launch and it was so much, she said it was way more successful than she ever thought it would be. But before that, she kept pushing it and pushing it. I think she waited on it for a couple of years until she finally set a deadline. And she looks back now and is upset at herself because she didn't set that deadline. And I have to remind her, well, that's something that you learned. So the key here is being able to set a deadline with something. So let's say you're going to create a project, some content that you want to share. You need to set a deadline of when you want that done, that project done, and then when do you want to share it. Have the deadlines in place and have them be consistent as much as possible. That way it's just a habit. Okay. Another good thing that you can do is find an accountability pod member, accountability partner. I'm so sorry. Or you can join a community of like-minded individuals. Now, I am going to encourage you to find an accountability partner or accountability group, because these are game changers. They are so amazing. And there's different ways you can set these up. And the way that I have found them very successful, I've done them in groups of like 4. I wouldn't recommend more than 4. 3 is pretty good, but 2, like just you and another person. There's something said about just having somebody in your world with you. And I meet with mine every week. And we discuss certain things of what has been going on in our week for the business, ideas that had popped into our head, and then we kind of just brainstorm off of those. We also ask, okay, what do you think of this idea? We talk about what we're going to be doing in the next week. So basically, there's my accountability. I'm setting a deadline. Sometimes they don't happen because guess what? We have a life, we have family, we have all these things that have to occupy our time elsewhere. For example, this week, I had to take a full day to can peaches because that's what happened. Last week, my brother needed me to take him to a doctor's appointment. So there was my whole morning, right? So that's the nice thing about being an entrepreneur. You can adjust. And don't be afraid to be open and flexible, but do set a deadline, especially for those big, big things, and make sure you stick to those big things. The little things like, oh, I want to post a social media post, and if something pops up, it's okay if it waits till the next day. It's just fine. But those big things like, I want to release this course, boom, set a deadline, release it on that date, okay? I want to release this mentorship, this group, this whatever it is. Big things, make sure you set a deadline and you stick to those deadlines. Don't allow those to pivot unless major things happen, which that has happened to me as well. My whole month of July did not go as planned for me and my family. We had a family emergency that happened and changed our world there. And I had to adapt. I had to push my course back. Things are still hard with our family, but it's okay. It's okay if you have to adjust. It's okay. But it was the fact that I had a deadline in the first place, and I knew that I could push it because I pushed it a whole month because of what had happened. And it was okay. It was fine. I actually pushed it a month and a half because I needed a little more time to gain back afterwards. But just find somebody that can make you accountable, somebody that can help you be in your world, understand what you're talking about, and go with it. And you don't even have to have just one. I have 2, and it's amazing. It's so great being able to brainstorm with other people. So please, please, please try to find your group, your accountability group, your partner, whatever you want to have there. Mine's called my podmate, my accountability podmate, because that's where it all started, was with Amy Porterfield's stuff. So whole nother story there, but that's where she came from. But I've had past ones too. We're long lifetime friends now. We've known each other for 5 years and we still text pretty often every week about business stuff, about life stuff. You become part of their world, and it is so spectacular. So I highly encourage it. The next thing that you can do to take action is make a plan, which again comes into that deadline thing. But be able to have a plan in the fact of steps that you need to take to complete the task. So, for example, creating a course, there are different steps that you have to take to create the course. To do a project, there's different steps. So have a plan in place about what you need to do, so then you can actually make a better deadline option too. So, because sometimes we are overambitious and we think we can have something done because we don't have it all mapped out. So make sure you map it all out before you set your deadline. And then the last one is celebrate your wins. This one is something more on the mindset side of things. So I'm reading a book right now, The Atomic Habit, which is going to be shared later this month for my book club. And he talks about there's different ways that we form habits, different ways that our mind works. And basically what it comes down to is that our mind needs to be rewarded. We need to be rewarded when something happens. And so that celebration for the win is just rewarding yourself. And the reward could be like, oh, I get a cookie, or oh, I'm going to go take a walk, or I am going to go spend the evening with my friends, or I'm going to go on a date with my husband or my partner, or whatever it may be, something that makes you happy. That is the key. Celebrate with something that makes you happy. And it could be something so little, something so little, but find what that item is. Make yourself happy. Give yourself that win and be okay with it. But here's the really cool thing about just taking action and not being overwhelmed, stopping yourself because you're just overwhelmed with all the steps. Just take action in it. And I mean, oh my gosh, that could be a whole nother topic about just not doing something because there's too many steps. And we should actually probably talk about that sometime. If you're interested in that, DM me. I'd love to hear if you're interested in talking about that, because I have some interesting ways of how I work through things and how I use a product management tool to do that. I know we're talking about product management tool next week, but we're not talking about this in particular. So if you're interested, let me know about that. But anyways, when you take action, the really cool thing is it helps you move one step closer to your dream or your goal. And we kind of discussed this in the beginning and how your goal or your dream can shift based off of your actions, but it can't unless you do take a step. You do take the action. So don't worry about making it perfect. Progress, right? Don't worry about getting everything right before you share it. It's about the progress. It's about just doing it, taking the action, because you'll learn as you go, and this will make you more successful. This will make you the successful entrepreneur that you dream about. So remember, next time that you start overthinking some project or task, whatever it might be, just jump into it 2 feet first.